Hey folks, it's 42 the answer to. Welcome back. So the first book that I'd like to talk about, I am a bit biased about because it's by one of my favorite authors. It's called The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. And unfortunately I'd show you the physical copy of the book right now, but unfortunately I have lent it out to someone, and also this review is based on the audiobook because I was lucky enough to get this on sale. And for those of you who don't know Neil Gaiman, first of all, you need to know him and you need to read his books. I'm a little biased, but he is one of my absolute favorites. And for those of you who like Neil Gaiman but have never listened to his audiobooks, you really, really need to. He reads his own audiobooks, and he reads with a skill that is pretty much unparalleled in any other author I've listened to read their own work. But, all that aside, I just want to say this is one of my favorite books of all time. I've read pretty much everything Neil Gaiman's ever read everything he's ever written, and this is probably my favorite besides Good Omens, which kind of doesn't count because it's Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, and I love them both. So, however, I do admit that is also possibly because I got to meet Neil Gaiman on the book tour that he did when he first came out with this book, and I have a lot of feelings towards how kind he was at that tour and the story behind how this book was written, and that it was written for his wife because he missed her because she was on tour at the time and he couldn't be with her. And I don't know, I think it gives a lot of feeling behind the book that gives me more positive feelings than maybe I would have had in the first place. But on the other hand, it is a phenomenal book. So in an attempt to be more structured, I will start with a summary, which is really, really hard in a non-spoilery context for this book. So, Ocean at the End of the Lane is about a young boy. Well, it is about a man who has just had someone in his family pass away. So he goes to an old farm near where he used to live as a child, and in doing so remembers an adventure from his childhood that he had forgotten. And I'm sorry that I can't give more. It is a really, really tough book to explain without spoiling it for anyone, and please read it. Please read it. This is Neil Gaiman in general, but this book in particular is one of the books where the way it is written is a gut punch. I mean, it just takes a hold of your soul and pulls it. And I have met very few authors who can do that to me with just their words. I don't need to identify with what they're saying to feel the impact. And I think that's a really, really cool thing. So I'm sorry if the summary wasn't great, but hopefully I can go on and list a couple of my favorite things that may get some of you a little more interested in. So first of all, I really, really love that this is an adult book. It is. It is not a children's book, which, that's a barrier that I don't always like because I personally enjoy a lot of children books, a lot of YA books, so not sure that's actually, those distinctions are questionable. Like, adults can enjoy children's books, but that aside, this is the only adult book I've read that is written from the perspective of a child. So you do have our main character, whose name we don't ever know, by the way, which I didn't actually realize until this time, which is about my third read through, so that's a little embarrassing. But you have a few chapters of him as an adult, where he interacts with some of these people from his past. But throughout this novel, he is a child. He is a 7-year-old boy telling his story and telling his adventure, but it is designed for adults, for reminiscence. And I don't know, there's something I really, really, really like about that. Another thing that I find really interesting about this book and that I really enjoy is that, and this is going to get a little political in a weird way, but sorry, you know how in children's novels, in YA, even in movies, if the main character is a boy, it's a movie for everyone, or literature for everyone. But if the main character is a girl, it's for empowering young women, it's for girls, it's a chick flick, it's, something like that. And so, girls kind of get this subconscious feeling that, girl characters are only for girls, and boys don't necessarily find it okay to look up to female role models. There's stories of boys on the internet being judged for preferring Wonder Woman to Superman, or, something like that. And I think that's changing, and I really hope it continues to, because I would really love to see diversity of all sorts in my books and in my movies, and gender is only one part of that, but, I would really love to see that. But the thing that I think is really, really cool in this book, and unfortunately I didn't highlight it, so I can't give an example of a specific name of one of the books, but Neil Gaiman actually talked about this later when someone mentioned it on his Tumblr. This little kid is very, very into books and reading, which is partially why I do identify with this kid and why I really, really enjoy reading about it. But he loves books so much, and what's so interesting is the books that he loves, that he gravitates towards, the characters he looks up to are girls. He reads the, stereotypical British schoolgirl mystery where, plucky young Susie saves the school by, disobeying her teachers and solving the mystery. And he admires them so, so much. And every single one of the books that he names by name have women protagonists and are this style, which is in really nice parallel to the fact that, Letty Hemstock, who, I'm sorry, I am getting into spoilers here for y'all, but Letty Hemstock is our hero. Letty Hemstock saves our protagonist's life, and her mother and her grandmother are also super, super wonderful and empowering and powerful, and they are all so wonderful. The Hemstock family is a family of women. There are Hemstock men, as they say, but they go off and they seek their fortune. The Hemstock women stay and get things done. And I really like that parallel, and I really like this idea that this is a little boy who finds inspiration in girls in his life, in his heroes, and I think that that's really cool, and I hope that this is a trend in non-fictional boys. But anyways, off that weird political moment, basically this is just a short novella that hits me in the heart and is a story in a lot of ways about the importance of stories, and just I love it so much. I really, really do. And I'm sorry that this is going to be probably one of my longest videos, just because I have so many thoughts and feelings on Ocean at the End of the Lane. But I'm just going to go ahead and read a couple of quotes. Some are funny, some are profound, some I want to talk about a little bit. So the first one I have is, he says, I liked myths. They weren't stories. Excuse me. I liked myths. They weren't adult stories, and they weren't children's stories. They were better than that. They just were. Adult stories never made sense, and they were so slow to start. They made me feel like there were secrets, Masonic, mythic secrets to adulthood. Why didn't adults want to read about Narnia, about secret islands and smugglers and dangerous fairies? And the reason why I really like that quote is, as mentioned by my earlier rant, I think some of the designations in literature are really frustrating. And I really like that children's stories are labeled because, there are some things that the way things are written about, I wouldn't want children exposed to. Like, that is absolutely a fair point. However, I remember being in late middle school, early high school, 13, 14, 15-year-old, when peer pressure is really starting to get to you. And I had series that I had been following since I was a child that, I would have to walk, and this is Borders, this is probably dating me a bit, but I would go into Borders and I would have to walk into the children's section. And I remember I used to feel so self-conscious about it until I went and I picked up the newest book of my, whatever series, and went to the cashier. And this cashier must have been 29, 30, late 20s at the youngest. And he just went, oh my gosh, you have to tell me how this is, because I loved the last book, but I haven't had a chance to read this one yet. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. If this adult, who is an adulty adult, and not me, who just, like, kind of thinks I am one because I decided I was some mature, like, oh, look at me, I am above my peer group. If he can read it, I can too. And so, you know, with my issues with kids' stories, adult stories, whatever, I kind of like this idea that myths are something in the middle, because they are, you know, and you can tell them in different ways that are more of an adult way or more of a childlike way, but they are stories for everyone, and I really do like that. And as an adult who does want to read about Narnia and smugglers and secret islands and dangerous fairies, like, I get his point, you know? There are some adult stories where people are like, oh, you have to read this, it's phenomenal. And I start and I'm just like, give me something. You gotta get me something to get me involved. Like, pick it up a little. And you know, most of them I love eventually, but really, like, come on, adult authors. You gotta pick up the story sometimes. Get us engaged right away, you know? But anyway, so I enjoyed that quote. Another one that I enjoyed, ooh, sorry, I'm on the Kindle and I don't know how to use it. Another quote that I really enjoyed, and I know this is kind of a weird one, but it's at a point where they are confronting our monster, Ursula Monkton. And it says, Ursula Monkton smiled, and the lightnings wreathed and writhed about her. She was power incarnate, standing in the crackling air. She was the storm, she was the lightning. She was the adult world with all its power and all its secrets and all its foolish, casual cruelty. And the reason I like that is really because of the idea as the adult world with all its power, all its secrets, all its casual cruelty. And that is how I think a lot of children, it's certainly how I felt a lot of the ways as a kid, and honestly even kind of now as an adult sometimes, where, you know, there's something innocent about childhood in the way that we view things, and it's really hard where, you know, right here he's seeing this dangerous monster is his babysitter of the time, and so, you know, she is a true representation of everything wrong with the adult world because his parents trust her and think that she's doing right and do not listen when he's saying she's a monster, she's trying to hurt me, she's trying to influence you. And yes, this is a magical situation, but you know, there are a lot of situations like that where children, you know, go to speak out and are not listened to. And it's something really interesting because Letty is standing up to her, and it's really interesting because right after that he says, but Letty was just a girl, even if she was a big girl, even if she was 11, even if she had been 11 for a very long time. Ursula Monkton was an adult. It did not matter at that moment that she was every monster, every witch, every nightmare made flesh. She was also an adult, and when adults fight children, adults always win. And it's something that made me really sad, and it really is true, and it shouldn't be true, because children have valid thoughts and feelings and opinions, and it's heartbreaking that we don't listen to them more. And I don't know, I just think that's something to think about. It's food for thought. So I'd love to hear what you guys think of that quote down below. And then moving on, I'm so sorry, y'all. Like, this was probably not the right one to start with because I'm so in love with it. Another quote about when they are facing this evil monster, Ursula Monkton, which they do make a point of saying, you know, she's beautiful, she's pretty, you know, that's why his little sister likes her, because she's nice and she's pretty. And he says, she really was pretty for a grown-up, but when you are 7, beauty is an abstraction, not an imperative. And oh, I just love that so much, because, you know, all those psychological studies on how when you are more physically attractive, you are more trustworthy, you are more, you know, beauty gets you a lot in the adult world, and it really, really shouldn't. You know, not that I'm gonna bash anyone who wants to be beautiful and does things to make themselves more beautiful. Like, I wear makeup when I go to formal occasions, and I try to make myself look prettier, and when I have a, you know, zit on my face, I'm, oh no, let me cover it up and let me, you know, whatever. But it is so interesting that as a child, you know, a lot of times you do see something pretty and you're like, wow, pretty, but it doesn't really change much. I don't know. I feel like beauty wasn't something that necessarily made me trust someone when I was younger, or made me believe them, or made me think too differently about them besides, oh, you're pretty. And I don't know, I liked it. I enjoyed that a lot as a little commentary on beauty. And then Another one that I really, really enjoyed. This is possibly one of my favorites. Oh, it looks like one of my highlights did not save. I apologize. Let me see if I can find it. This is probably gonna be cut. There's perhaps only one more that I liked more than this, but this is, I do not miss childhood, but I miss the way I took pleasure in small things, even as greater things crumbled. I could not control the world I was in, could not walk away from things or people or moments that hurt, but I found joy in the things that made me happy. And that's a lesson that I think that we all really should learn from. I know that myself, I've been having a lot of anger and a lot of sadness and frustration and just a lot of bad juju, man, like a lot of bad feelings. And it's hard for the little things to make you happy, but I think we should always try to find the joy, which is a really stereotypical phrase from around a point in my life right now. But, you know, I think it is true. And, you know, not that there isn't a time to rage and a time to be frustrated, and you absolutely have a right to your bad feelings and your opinions, but I don't think it's bad to try to find something nice and to enjoy a cat sitting next to you, or a clean apartment, or a good grade, or a good meal, or I don't know, a nice night spent with your spouse, or with your kids, or with your friends, or I don't know, just enjoy the things that make you happy. A good book, a good audiobook. So I really like that, because I think it's going to be something that I'm going to try to take to heart in being a little better about finding the joy and enjoying small things in life, like I did when I was a kid, and anything that made me happy made me explosively, joyously thrilled. Not sure I can generate that same kind of enthusiasm all the time as I did when I was a kid. I just don't have the energy, but I think it's something to think about. And then let's see if I can get, I think it may have deleted one of my notes, which is sad. Oh, nope, I just, there's a lot more. Just a couple ones that very accurately, bless you kitty, accurately explain my feelings towards books. Books were safer than other people anyways. This poor kid had a bad experience with a birthday party. And I've always felt that too, honestly, where, you know, sometimes you just have a rough day and people can't cut it, but literature, A+, A+. He also says, I was not happy as a child, although from time to time I was content, which I was a happy child, but this is one of those don't identify, but it still hits the heart. He says, I lived in books more than I lived anywhere else, and that is absolutely true of me back then, and honestly still now. My books mean pretty much everything for me, and it's super important. So finally, just one funny quote before I go on to a kind of profound and I think a really interesting lesson from this that I really enjoy. So this poor kid, he talks about how he was trying to go to a wax museum and found a unit on killers, and he thought it was going to be so scary and so cool, and it was going to be werewolves and monsters and all these scary things. But it turns out it was just, you know, serial killers that he didn't recognize, and he said that there were plaques there, and the plaques that explained who they were also told me that the majority of them had murdered their families and sold the bodies to anatomy. It was then that the word anatomy garnered its own edge of horror for me. I did not know what anatomy was. I only knew that anatomy made people kill their children. I just, as someone who has studied anatomy, I don't know, it makes me laugh. I really hated anatomy, so anything that, like, bashes it a little makes my heart smile a little bit, so perhaps a little biased. But finally, to end on kind of a serious note, the last quote that I took from this book that I really, really identify with is, as this man is learning his lesson and he's ending his visit with these women and about to go back to his funeral and his real life after reliving this whole adventure, he's feeling guilty about Letty having sacrificed herself for him, and he doesn't really feel that he's worth it. And she's been examining him while he's been reminiscing, because he's been sitting and staring at the place essentially where she sacrificed herself. And he goes and he asks her mother and her grandmother, did I pass? You know, pass the test of being worth the sacrifice. And the mother responds, "You don't pass or fail at being a person, dear." And it's just really important to me, because I think that we need to remember that, you know, things happen, bad things happen. Sometimes life is really shitty. Excusing the language, I'm going to try not to use that as much, but that's, I mean, sometimes life is horrible and you don't deserve it most of the time. There's some people doing nasty things, where if you do nasty things, like very nasty things, and you get punished for it, I mean, that's your fault. But you know, when misfortune befalls you, it's not always because you're a bad person. You know, freak accidents happen and misfortunes happen, and you cannot blame yourself, and you cannot internalize it, because you'll just go through life miserable and unhappy, and it's just not worth it. So that's my little preaching moment. Sorry, this is really becoming such a long video. But yeah, if you guys liked this sort of review, this book, I really do suggest you look at Neil Gaiman's other work. He is very prolific in this sort of surrealistic, like urban fantasy. I don't know, he is very good at taking normal, modern, you know, rather than taking straight fantasy, he takes modern day or near modern day and just adds a slight magical twist that maybe it's everywhere, maybe it's just in this slight portion that our character goes into and, you know, discovers this brand new world. And just I'm in love with the worlds he builds. It's fascinating, it's so interesting, and I do think you guys will enjoy it too. I've also found that Patrick Rothfuss, the book's The Name of the Wind, in that series, The Kingkiller Chronicles, he's another author whose books just kind of punch me in the heart, and that also do talk about the importance of stories and the importance of books and words in the books themselves. There's actually a quote that I didn't read because it was really long, where he speaks about the language of shaping and how he would tell people in a dream, be whole, and they would be whole because they spoke the language of shaping. And I really do think that language as a whole is a shaping language. And, you know, we have the power to do so much with our words. And that's what Patrick Rothfuss and Neil Gaiman write so much about. So if you do like Neil Gaiman, I do suggest you check out Patrick Rothfuss as well. If I think of any other recommendations, I will link them in the box below. But other than that, I think that's it. So thank you for sticking with me for 23 minutes. The others probably won't be this long because I will not have as many quotes. I just, like I said, that book may only be 100 and something pages, but it's possibly one of my favorite books of all time. So I hope you enjoyed listening to me rant about the amazingness of The Ocean at the End of the Lane and Neil Gaiman for a while. I hope you check out the book if you have not already. And I will see y'all later. Bye-bye.